After 5 episodes that were more on the mediocre side, will the 6th episode wow us, or will it be more of the same? Or will it even be less convincing? Join me for this short video to find out. Let's jump right into the synopsis. In this episode, Jen is invited by an old friend from high school to be her bridesmaid, which she accepts even though they lost contact, but she assumes that she's been asked out of obligation, which also is the reason why she accepts to be bridesmaid. Appearing there in her She-Hulk persona, the bride, Lulu, asks her to be just Jen, which is also the title of this week's episode, because she doesn't want her to take attention away from her because it's her day. As Titania, the one who has sued her for the use of the name She-Hulk and lost last episode, has told her that it is not over yet, of course she makes an appearance, having snaked her way into the wedding by befriending one of the groomsmen. Which is remarkable because Jen herself didn't get a +1, so she is assigned a groomsman, which turned out to be a small dog. Something she didn't really think is that funny, although everyone else thinks that the thing is really cute. While Jen in her private persona seems to get a little bit closer to someone who might become a love interest in the future, of course Titania seeks trouble and the inevitable fight between the two of them is kicked off, which Titania loses and also loses some teeth in the process because she is stumbling over some ice cubes and falls flat on her face. Something that is captured by a dozen cell phones and being transferred directly into social media. As the bride finds this scene, she turns out to be already drunk and didn't even remember that Jen is the She-Hulk. She just sees She-Hulk and embraces her, saying, "Hey, you are at my wedding? That is a nice surprise." Meanwhile, Nikki, Jen's friend and paralegal, is supporting Mallory with a case where an immortal person, who calls himself fittingly and very cleverly Mr. Immortal, is seeking help because he is sued by his ex-wives. As he always seems to get out of a marriage by faking his own death, by killing himself and then being resurrected later on. Here Nikki can really prove herself to Mallory because she is a master negotiator and manages to make all the ex-wives happy with something individual that they ask of Mr. Immortal. At the end of the episode, we find out that the webpage called Intelligentsia is sporting a lot of death threats against She-Hulk. Something that seems to be connected to the attack a few weeks earlier, where we also see that they are apparently planning a new attack. This time with stronger needles and maybe some other tricks up their sleeves. Okay, I really wanted to make this short, but there is a lot of stuff to unravel this week. Because first of all, I noticed that it was Friday when I watched the episode and not Thursday, which tells me that I'm not really that excited about this show and makes me think that maybe the previous weeks I was a little bit too gracious with rating some of the episodes with 7 out of 10 points. I'm saying this because this week I almost felt bored with the episode and I drifted off a little bit here and there, with my thoughts going other ways, like thinking about what to say in a review, which usually doesn't happen. Usually I can concentrate on an episode or a movie without thinking about rating it later on, but this time it was different. Some instances of this episode were even cringeworthy, like Jen accepting being bridesmaid and then showing up as the She-Hulk. Something which I would have assumed every woman would know would be a wrong move, because you should never take away attention from the bride. And taking into consideration that Jen is not happy with the fact that she herself is not as admired as a She-Hulk, and she still isn't 100% happy with being She-Hulk, it doesn't even make sense that she showed up as the She-Hulk there. Then the next thing that really bothered me is that she was wearing one of the dresses that the special designer created for her, and then after she shrunk back into just being Jen, the dress doesn't even fit that well. She even had to keep the seams up a little bit just to keep walking, which defeats the purpose of the whole design, I think. Then you have Titania showing up, which obviously is a ploy to just get close to her and get on her nerves. But if you don't want to look stupid, that is something you don't call out that loud. But of course Jen is just saying that straight up in front of the bride, which she understandably takes quite personal, because if someone tells you that someone famous is just showing up at your wedding to be close to someone else, is a little bit offensive. Which brings me to the point that we still haven't learned much more about Jen as a person and a character. Except that she is a little bit naive and you don't understand how she got to the place in life where she is right now. Which is a little bit unsatisfying considering that the screenplays and the whole show is being strongly supported by female voices in the writer's room and in producing capacity. So why would they fall back and rely on such stupid tropes? The whole scenario in this episode around her and Titania seems more like coming from the mind of a man than a woman, because it is so antiquated. And by extension you might say this about Titania as a character in its entirety. The saddest thing is that the episode is mostly about Jen at the wedding, yet still we learn more about Mallory from some small talks in between than we have learned yet about Jen in the whole series. And there was another unneeded instant of breaking the fourth wall, where she basically just turned to us telling us that this will be a self-contained wedding episode, which usually, as she put it, comes in an unfitting time within the season, as a wedding usually comes in real life. Which was quite pointless, because then we had the B story, where it was not just about the wedding, where it was about Mr. Immortal. And also, to be a self-contained wedding story, we should not have Titania in there, because Titania is a callback to the previous episode. So it is not self-contained at all, making her call out completely stupid and nonsensical. But enough about her and her part of the story. Let's look at the court case, or in this episode, a case that doesn't even get to court because they found an understanding with the ex-wives. What we are shown in the episode is that if he kills himself, he resurrects instantly and is alive again. So how would anyone even think that he is dead? Because he could kill himself and it appears like he is dead, but if someone is then checking his pulse, or if a doctor would check him afterwards, he would be alive again and there is no moment where he is actually dead, except for maybe a fraction of a second in between. So that whole concept was stupid and didn't make much sense, at least in the way that they presented it. But the interesting question we had, if you are immortal and you die, even if it is just technically for a second in between, does that count as the end of a marriage because it is till death do us part? I guess the answer would have been no anyway, because if someone has a heart attack and their heart stops and then they are revived, they would still remain married to their spouse, but at least it would have been a more interesting concept than just ignoring that stuff completely. Here they basically just concentrated on what each wife wants to receive to make her forget and forgive what happened. Now, before we get to the rating, let me ask you to like and share this video if you enjoyed it so far. And if you are no subscriber yet, maybe consider to change that. By also hitting the notification bell, you will get a heads up for most of my new videos. And now for the rating. As you will have successfully deducted, this week I'm not that happy with this episode. It was partially stupid and partially cringe-worthy, and worst of all, partially boring, so that I was not really drawn into the episode and was just waiting for it to be over. And thinking back at her comment when she broke the fourth wall, that this wedding episode comes at a time where it is most inconvenient for the whole series, I was thinking, does it? Because what am I to expect from the rest of the show? I don't see if there's a big bad coming, and if the big bad is supposed to be Titania, then it is even more laughable and so stereotypical that I don't even want to think about it. But mostly, except for that there will be a court case, I have no expectation about this series at all, which should also be a red flag. As I mentioned before in this video, I think I have given too high a rating to the previous episodes, because if they were entertaining from start to finish, but weren't that great, maybe that should not translate into a 7, but more into a 5 or a 6. With that being said, I think this episode was just okay, not more than that. And though it might seem to be unfair to drop to a score of 4 now, down from 7, as I just said, maybe the other episodes were just scored too high, but for this one, it can just be a 4 out of 10, nothing more. So I guess this means for me this episode was the one where it really jumped the shark. Was it the same for you, or are you still happy with the show as it is? Do you have some more expectations, and if so, what are they? Let me know in the comments. So much for now, see you next time and thanks for watching.